It's the Blood Red podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along the Reds. Bitten by the Foxes in the hunt for the Premier League title 2021. A year of highs and lows for Liverpool. We'll be looking back on that. And a trip to Chelsea awaits as Liverpool in need of bridging the gap to leaders Man City in the title race. Here to get into all of that, we have the chief, Ian Doyle, the face that runs the place, Joe Rimmer, and looking forward to bringing in the new year with some milk on his Bran Flakes for once. It's Matt Addison. Gents, I hope you're all well. The final pod of 2021. And I was just thinking, Joe, before we came on, I didn't want to ask Matt because I wanted to throw that at him, but I have to say we're going to get into the highs and lows of 2021 in a bit. But taking into consideration, I'm pretty sure that was in this calendar year. That has to be Blood Red's moment of the year, doesn't it?
Has to be the lowest point of 2021, maybe the lowest point of anything of all time. Saying Bran Flakes is your favourite cereal is just, you know what? I don't know why Matt's still here. Perfect. So after that, there should be no comeback from that.
It wasn't that long ago, was it? It was only what, 2 or 3 months ago, something like that. And,
is that it?
Yeah, it's been mentioned that many times since. It feels like a lot longer.
All right. No, I was even considering if it was even in this calendar year. But what a statement that was! What a year it has been. Doyle, any word on that?
I said it all at the time. There's no more that needs to be added.
How much grief do you still get for it, Matt? By the way.
Oh, only from you guys, not ready for anyone else. A couple of replies on Twitter, but apart from that, it's I don't know. I think it's a
so nowhere near enough then.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like there is.
I've been bringing it back out in the open then. What I thought it wasn't his favourite cereal. It was what he would regard as having one
very much
on a special occasion, which of course makes it even worse.
And New Year's Eve, so
it wasn't a special occasion, was it? It was I had to eat it every day, 3 times a day for 2 weeks in quarantine. That's what it was.
No, it wasn't. That's definitely not it.
That's still not even defensible.
That was not it.
Yeah, that's still not defensible. Anyway, let's get into what we're.
I tell you when it was. It was the first international break of the season when we were talking about Brazilian players having to be in quarantine. That's what it was.
Ah, that is when it was. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, all of that time ago. Well, anyway, let's get into what we're here for, to talk football. And if anyone wants to send Matt a tweet about Bran Flakes, it's at Matt Addison 97. Anyway, Doyle, on to the matter in hand. On Monday's pod, we were talking about the title race and talking about a visit to Leicester upcoming for Liverpool and the fact they should be able to beat a rather depleted squad and continue kind of on the coattails of Man City. Didn't quite work out like that, though.
No, and I hate to be the one that says, well, I told you so. Well, on the way to the game and in our blog before the game and during the game, it's one of these games you could see it coming a mile off what was going to happen. Tends to be the case when you have two teams who play each other in quite quick succession, especially when, I know Leicester had a game in between against Man City, but, it's not as if they completely forgot what had happened at Anfield 6 days earlier. It wasn't good. Not on the pitch, but certainly in the stands, there wasn't a lot of love lost between the two sets of supporters. Kind of made for a slightly nasty atmosphere. You saw the way that Liverpool celebrated after they won the penalty shootout pointedly towards the away fans. Kind of that carried on. I mean, Leicester were on it was a no-lose situation for them, was it? If they'd have lost, it would have been, well, we've got no players. But, they managed to dig in, and Liverpool showed last season that you don't necessarily have to have two, over a longer period of time. It helps if you have got two centre-backs playing at centre-back, but you can get away every now and again with having two midfielders there. And while I know Brendan Rodgers was praised for a tactical masterclass, it wasn't really, was it? It was basically just get everybody behind the ball. And if we're still 0-0 after about 55 minutes, let's throw on some fast plays to stretch them a bit. And that's exactly what happened. And it was the fact that Liverpool missed a penalty, missed a sitter, missed a couple of other chances. That's why they didn't win. I mean, Liverpool didn't play well at all. It was the worst they played all season, and only time will tell how much of a impact that makes on the title race. Although if you mention it, look at Man City, what are they now? 9 points clear. I mean, it's probably done, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's all done and dusted. So we may as well just finish this pod and all go home for 6 months.
Yeah, go celebrate. No, Joe, that was a question I was going to ask you. 9 points. Is that a gap that can be drawn back against this Man City side?
Of course it is. I mean, we're halfway through the season. It's very unlikely because Man City are very, very good. But, it's them losing one game and Liverpool going to the Etihad and winning, isn't it? And then obviously Liverpool have got to win other games. But I don't think 6 points is done and dusted. If you don't forget when 2019, when Liverpool I think Liverpool had a 6-point advantage at one stage. City had games in hand, and Liverpool drew 2 games at home. City won at the Etihad, and it all swung, didn't it? So I don't, I think people like to get very carried away. At the moment, everything feels massive, doesn't it? And that's what football's like at the moment, because you have these teams that are so good and the way they compete against each other. It's not like 10 or 15 years ago where Man United might lose 5 games in a season and still win the league with sort of 80 points. It's not like that anymore. Everything feels massive. So I don't think it's done and dusted. I think it would be very, very difficult, and Liverpool will have to play some of the best football. And I think Klopp said before, hasn't he, that defend really, really well and put in the perfect games at times. But yeah, I think there's a long, long way to go. And one thing that Doyle should know better than anyone is not to write this Liverpool team off. I mean, he's been there and seen it before, so let's not sit here halfway through the season and do it. Slightly disagree on the Leicester game. I think there's been a lot made of how good Leicester were and how bad Liverpool were, but second half, yeah, I don't think Liverpool played very well. But let's face it, they missed a penalty, they missed a follow-up where Salah heads onto the bar. Schmeichel made a really, really good save with his left hand to turn a Salah chance over the bar. He made a good save with his foot late on against Van Dijk. Mane missed what I thought was a sitter. I think Liverpool looked tired at times and ran out of ideas in the second half where Leicester threw everything behind the ball. But let's not forget, on another day, you'd expect Liverpool to take 1 or 2 of those chances, certainly score the penalty, and you're talking about a different game. So again, I think people are getting a bit carried away with the performance. I don't think it was that bad. Liverpool were average in the second half, but they were by far the better side in the first half and had Leicester pinned back, and Leicester had a bit of luck, and yeah, they got the win, but let's not get carried away.
Yeah, what's your take, Matt? Because I suppose going into the game, no Boxing Day match. Leicester obviously off the back of a bit of a hiding at the Etihad. Jurgen Klopp obviously having spoken about fixture congestion and whatnot. To me, it did feel as though a bit there, as Doyle was kind of saying, there was kind of the recipe for something to then throw a spanner in the works. And I suppose that is what it is, isn't it? It's a setback, but perhaps not everything done and dusted. Are you Team Doyle or Team Joe Rimmer?
No, I think I agree with bits of each of them, to be honest. I think in terms of the specific game itself, Liverpool didn't really look like getting back into it. I think, as Joe said, there was a couple of moments really where it just felt like it kind of went against Liverpool and at the same time kind of lifted Leicester. I think that the penalty is a big one. Obviously, that gets the crowd up. And there was a couple of other moments within the game which probably, as much as it harmed Liverpool by not scoring them, it probably helped Leicester in terms of sort of giving them a bit of hope in terms of the players, but also in terms of the fans as well in the ground. I think a lot of them probably, given the injuries, the sort of team that they've got going into that match, heading into the stadium, probably would have taken a narrow 1 or 2 goal defeat. I know that's obviously not a mentality that you want for most games, but I think having shipped 6 against Manchester City, they've conceded plenty of goals this season from set pieces and various other things. I think there was probably quite a few Leicester fans fearing the worst, really. And I think once 2 or 3 bits kind of go for you, it starts to build a little bit of belief that maybe it's not going to be quite as difficult as what you thought. They defended obviously well. They get a little bit lucky at times with obviously the penalty miss. It's Salah's first missed penalty in 17 or 18 attempts, something like that. It just felt like a couple of the key moments went the wrong way for Liverpool. And like Joe said, it could have been, if Salah had scored that penalty, maybe Liverpool had taken 1 or 2 of the other chances. We could be quite easily sat here talking about a 3 or 4 goal win. So yeah, it's narrow margins. It's not over yet. But at the same time, I do agree with Doyle more, really. I think in terms of the title race, it's going to be very difficult. I think obviously the position that Liverpool are in, they know they've got a game in hand, but you'd rather have the points on the board. I think the other difficult thing as well, obviously we'll talk about Chelsea in a little bit, but Liverpool have already played Chelsea and City at home. They've now got to go there and obviously do the same thing again. And obviously having drawn at home, you maybe don't fancy them as much to go there and win it at those 2 places. So look, if Liverpool do win the league, it'll be a case of having to probably go to at least one, if not both, of Chelsea and City and win. And it's not impossible, but it's probably unlikely.
Yeah, okay. Doyle, in terms of if it is then the title race done, where will Liverpool look back on it? Is it a lack of depth in midfield? I suppose in recent weeks there has been a lot of disruption, obviously, around the virus, but the fact that I suppose Fabinho and Henderson were both back for the Leicester game, but both coming back in a bit cold, I suppose. Maybe, is it a case of the squad wasn't prepared, perhaps, well enough?
I think it's probably the case that they don't have £600 billion like Manchester City. Would probably be the reason why.
Simple as that, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
There is. I can't add anything else to it. Look, let's face it, if it wasn't for Liverpool, and I know that obviously you'd have Everton and United fans wouldn't agree with this at all, but if it wasn't for Liverpool, the last couple of years the Premier League would have been, even more boring than it actually has been. Let's be honest; they're the only team that's not capable of challenging them, City. So, in that respect, I think over a longer period of time, I would imagine some fans would probably be thanking Liverpool for making it more interesting than it actually is, because you look over at Germany, look at Bayern Munich, what's happening over there. From here, we look at it and go, wow, Bayern Munich, great team. But I'm sure in Germany, they go, oh, great. They've won the league for about the 13th time in a row. And you've seen this season, I know there's the impact of coronavirus on supporters, but there's more empty seats at stadiums. I don't think that's just entirely to do with COVID. I think possibly there's a little bit of interest getting lost in the game. And that's what's happened when they had almost a year of not being there. I think some people have reappraised things. And I think with City, I actually think that any season that Manchester City don't win the league or Paris Saint-Germain in France, then the manager should be sacked.
Okay. So you reckon as this Liverpool team ages then, and if they don't get it right, then we're just ready for a monopoly of Man City win after them?
Well, the thing about that is that these monopolies don't go on forever, do they? You've seen that. Look at United. Theirs was completely different. Theirs because they just happened to be the best team with the best manager, and that went on for 15, 20 years. Arsenal won the league a couple of times, and they looked like they could do it. And it stops Liverpool in the 70s and 80s, Everton for a bit in the 80s. These things do not go on forever. So there is that. But there was, funny enough, I'm not sure whether we're going to mention this. So I might ruin it in case you already were thinking about it. There was an interesting interview. Well, Jamie Carragher does his stuff in the Telegraph, doesn't he? And he was talking about Liverpool need to start looking at being a bit like Chelsea in terms of looking to win cups. And I know they've got to the semi-finals of the League Cup, and the FA Cup starts next week. But he's right, because Liverpool probably won't win the league this year. Take up a massive effort to win the Champions League, as far as I'm concerned. Although they've got every chance to get to the semi-finals, possibly even the final with the team that they got. They might end up winning nothing again. They won nothing last year. I know they won the 4 trophies the 18 months before that, but then this team deserves to be winning more than they are at the moment. And I think they've got to a League Cup semi-final. The FA Cup is, as I say, that's on the horizon. They need to be looking to start winning this, because I'm not saying that they're going to give up on the league. There's no chance they are. They'll probably finish second, but then City know that they're going to be the main rivals for them, because I don't think Chelsea are actually as good as, we've kind of seen that over the last, say, 2 months. They're not probably quite at that level. They overachieved last year winning the Champions League, really, in a kind of a fake season, as it were. So I think that's kind of warped the expectations we should have from them. Liverpool and City are the best 2 teams. City are better than Liverpool, but Liverpool probably need to get more silverware to justify what they deserve for the talent that they've got.
Yeah, what's your take on that, Joe? Because I suppose with the Champions League, I might get lynched for saying this, but kind of get 3 trophies in one, in winning the Super Cup and the Club World Cup off the back of it, when Liverpool were in theory superior to the Europa League winners Chelsea, and then obviously the European side are always the favourites for the Club World Cup. But 1 Champions League, 1 Premier League of the real big ones that Liverpool have competed for, as well as obviously the 2 that I've added on to the Champions League win there. Has it been enough silverware for this golden Liverpool side?
No, I think Doyle's spot on. I read that Carragher column and thought he absolutely hit the nail on the head. And it's been one of my biggest frustrations really in recent years is, even looking back at the Leicester game the other night, the 3-3, I thought the team that Klopp picked in the for the first half was just, I just thought it was a bit silly, really. I'm not being disrespectful to the players he picked, but putting a player like Quartet in against an experienced Leicester team in the quarterfinals of competitions, I just thought it just didn't feel right. He then had to make changes anyway and bring people on. But yeah, I totally agree with Carragher. I think my biggest frustration with this Liverpool team is if Klopp leaves in however many years' time, 2-3 years' time, Liverpool have won league, won Champions League, and yeah, they won the Club World Cup and the Super Cup after that. But in terms of major trophies, won league, won Champions League, and then finished second, get to a semi-final, another semi-final, and that's just frustrating. You want silverware to go along with that. Football's about moments. It's about days out. It's about anyone who's been to a cup final knows it's about those occasions. And we make jokes here, but I don't like the way the League Cup's dismissed. I don't think we should dismiss the FA Cup. Liverpool should be in these competitions to win them, and I think I'm sure Klopp would argue, look, we don't have the squad to attack every trophy in the same way. But for me, if you get to the quarterfinal of a competition, you should be attacking it. You should be looking to win it. And in some respects, I don't know, Gorsty wrote in his verdict that Liverpool lost the wrong game. But I don't know whether I 100% agree against Leicester because I think, coming into the season, what difference does it make if you're 6 points off the top or 9 points compared to winning a trophy? I think that'll come out in the wash, won't it, at the end of the season, whether they won the wrong game. So personally, I think they do have to win more competitions. To go back to the original question to Doyle, I think he was right in saying, look, Liverpool were always going to be the Arsenal to City's United, weren't they? Because they've just got the resources to go again every year to expand their squad. They don't have to cut their cloth accordingly in some windows. They don't have to be careful. They can take gambles on signings. And, I look at one of my biggest frustrations. You look at someone like Thiago, and I saw a tweet, or it might have been an Instagram post after the Leicester game the other night saying Liverpool, Thiago's started 6 games for Liverpool alongside Fabinho in midfield, and they've not lost a single game. And I thought, it was like in praise of Thiago, but I just think, but that's the problem, isn't it? Sorry, the 6 games that he's not started, they haven't won. And I thought, well, that's the problem, isn't it? Thiago needs to start more games. And, it's the same for him. It's the same for Keita. You hear a lot of people saying Keita came on and changed the game against Leicester in the 3-3. But to me, we spent 50 million on a midfielder who doesn't start enough. He should be playing every week if he's that good. And his problem is he'll leave Liverpool and he's playing in, 30% of the games or 40% of the games of the season. It's not enough. And the best signings Liverpool have made in recent years play almost every game. Salah does, Mane does, Van Dijk does, Fabinho plays a hell of a lot, Andy Robertson plays a hell of a lot. These guys don't miss football. And you've got people like Keita and Thiago who just miss far too many matches. And that's why Wijnaldum was so good. And to me, they're the difference makers for Liverpool, because you're going on Sunday now with no Thiago because he's struck down by another injury problem. And you need consistency. You need people to stay fit if you're going to win titles. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, that's kind of, I suppose, brings us back round to that point of where this is maybe fallen away for Liverpool, of saying to Doyle before being dismissed out of hand immediately was the squad prepared, right? Because some of those players aren't durable to the level of which others have been. And certainly in recent weeks, Matt, it's felt as though in that midfield there's been an awful lot of disruption. It's easy to say, where was the Gini Wijnaldum replacement? But why wasn't maybe more done to keep him around someone who could have been able to play through those games? And don't think you're getting away without being able to defend the League Cup as well, Matt. I know how much you love it.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, at this point in the competition, I think you've got to take it seriously. I think if you can get to a semi-final by making a few changes, which is what Liverpool have done, then obviously at that point you definitely go for it and see what happens. And Liverpool should be right up there in terms of the favourites, obviously, at this point in the competition. So, yeah, be interesting to see what Klopp does with that. Obviously, with the Shrewsbury game in between as well, there's a bit of an opportunity to have a bit of rotation in there, I think. So, yeah, 100% on that point. I think Joe's spot on as well with obviously the injuries, the state of the squad. I think it's always interesting when people say, oh, Manchester City have got a huge squad list. They've got all of these players. I think they've only got a relatively small squad, but it's 19 or so absolute top quality £50 million players, and it's not necessarily they've got sort of 2 in every area or they've got loads of players in every area. It's more a case of the ones that they've got, that you can rely upon. And I think that's what Liverpool are asking for, isn't it? That's what, when fans say, Gini Wijnaldum replacement and things like that. I can't remember who it was that asked him, but someone said in the summer, about a Gini Wijnaldum replacement in a press conference, and Jurgen Klopp kind of said, well, what do you want from a midfielder? What do you think? And I know there was kind of a conversation at the time of, should it be more goals? Should it be X, Y, or Z? And I think fundamentally the first thing is that they are available a little bit more. And it's something that people have said for a long time. It's not it's nothing new. It's nothing sort of groundbreaking, but I think that's what Manchester City have got this season. And I suppose that the only thing that stops me saying this 100% is the difference, obviously, is that City haven't really had much of an impact in terms of their squad with COVID yet. Obviously, that could still happen over the next couple of weeks if they have a similar situation. They have 2 or 3 players missing. Suddenly, things can look a little bit different. I think they've maybe been slightly fortunate in that regard, but at the same time, they've got a lot of quality and a lot of reliable options. Obviously, they've integrated these players very well, and I think that's kind of the difference, isn't it? They've got kind of a similar number of players almost, but it's more players that you can rely upon. And when you combine that, as I say, with a little bit of luck in terms of positive tests and so on, up to this point at least, I think that's probably the key difference between the two teams.
Yeah, our former esteemed colleague James Pearce, I think, was the one who asked that question about the midfield options and was asked who would he sign and this, that, and the other. And I suppose with City on the point on that was the year Liverpool did win the title, was the year they were beset with injuries at the heart of defence. Certainly, Aymeric Laporte following year went out and got Ruben Diaz as well as Laporte coming back. But as much as that was a therapy session for you guys and I enjoyed listening in, let's talk about the high points of 2021. Of course, there have been lows. The run at Anfield at the start of the year wasn't great, but in terms of a high point, Stoyley, what was your favourite moment covering the Reds through the calendar year?
Probably in about 9 hours when it finishes. You knew that was coming. You knew that was coming. That was too easy, that one. That was far too easy.
I set them up.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Hey, right. Well, most of it's been awful. Certainly the first 5 months. So you can discount all the way, apart from Alisson's header against West Brom, and you can discount the whole of everything up until August. After that, Salah's goal up against Man City. His goal at West Brom, his goal at Watford, was even funnier, simply because of the reaction of the crowd. Obviously, winning 5-0 at Man United is always good for Liverpool, especially when you're 5-0 up after about an hour and then you can just pass the ball around and United can't get anywhere near them. Winning 4-1 at Everton, you can't knock that. But yeah, otherwise, it's not been great, has it? I know people say like, "Oh, you're so miserable," but it's just. I still haven't got over last season, I'll be honest. I was having this conversation the other day with somebody, I think it was Sean actually, earlier this month, and I just still haven't got over last season. That goes back to the point.
What, it being soulless?
Yeah, that goes back to the point that I was saying earlier about the fans not turning up for some of the games. There's some I think have just fell out of love with it, and I'm not saying I've gone that far, but I do think that it's not back to the way it should be, is it, if we're being honest? I mean, the fans being back was good for the first couple of games, but then what unfortunately has happened, which has been interesting actually in a way, is that not just talking Liverpool, just talking generally. Look what's happened in France, for example. They're getting crowd violence all the time, every single week, and their fans were away for a year. Same with here. I mean, that's not happened in most other countries, but we're having conversations about negative things to do with fans, like the things that Leicester were chanting the other day, and they were chanting at Anfield as well. They've not been the only ones either. And there's been issues that Liverpool had issues, didn't it, at Norwich in the first game of the season, but with what was being said about Billy Gilmour. So, and then Norwich are having issues with their own fans about what they're saying to Billy Gilmour. So it is there's stuff, and obviously it's to do with the whole of society and the way things have changed over the past 18 months, 2 years because of coronavirus, but it's not back to what it was. Will it ever be back to that? Well, we don't know for sure. It'll just be different, won't it? And I think, can't speak for anybody else, but I'm still adjusting to the difference and not quite there yet. Sorry.
2021, the year Ian Doyle found even more cynicism. Is that?
It's not cynicism, actually. It's not cynicism. It's genuine, heartfelt. Cynicism would just be, coming out with any kind of nonsense. At least I've given reasons for it.
Right.
I know I'm not the only one either, which is why when the high points happened, like Alisson's header, it was like, well, that was hilarious. It's like, I'm not saying it was worth the previous 9 months, but it was very, very funny and above anything else. And as I've said before, I said this before it even happened. I said that Liverpool finishing well, in the top four. They ended up finishing third, didn't they, last season? Was a bigger achievement than they get in the Champions League final in 2018. I remember saying that in like January, February if they did it, and there's been nothing to change my mind on that. And if anything, this season they've kind of been, overachieved a little bit, I think. Was it they've lost 2 games in 37? I mean, that's, in most other seasons you'd be miles away at the top of the league, but as I said, with City. But what was interesting, funny joke, kind of reminded me of it just what he was saying before, is that after 19 games last season, Liverpool was 6 points off the top of the league, and United were top. And this season, exactly the same again. But I'm pretty sure that Liverpool aren't going to fall away like what happened last season. So I do think they're going to do better in the second half of the season. They'll make a fist of a title challenge, but as I've said, it would take something remarkable to happen to Man City, such as Matt's pointed out, they could get hit by COVID outbreak. I hope they don't, for their sake. But it might happen. But might get hit by injuries. You never know. But as things stand at the moment, you'd expect them to just run away with the title now.
Yeah, cool. All right, Doyley's dealt with our 2021 review and 2023 preview there in the full 5 minutes show. I suppose it has, though, been a calendar year just of moments. On the whole, it has been quite subdued, but along the way, there has been Alisson's goal at West Brom, obviously the big away wins over United and Everton, and certainly for the first half of this season, just the form of Mohamed Salah. If that can't bring a smile to your face, even Ian Doyle's, then surely something's up.
Well, do you know what? I totally agree with Doyle, and actually, up to the end of what he was talking about there, I actually felt a bit sorry for him. So it shows.
Never feel sorry for me. Never feel sorry for me. Never.
But he's absolutely right. The first half of the year was just, football was just awful, wasn't it? But I think sometimes we have to remember that when you follow Liverpool, it's easy, isn't it, to sort of, at the moment as well, with Man City setting such a high bar, and every defeat feels like the absolute end of the world. But like Dory's just said, 2 defeats in 37, and along the way, a 5-0 win at Old Trafford, a 4-2 win at Old Trafford, a 4-1 win at Goodison Park. Like these types of results that some football clubs talk about for years and years on end. I think sometimes we have to remember that we have some really, really good times, and we get to watch some really, really good performances. So, that there has been, in a year that most people would say in Klopp's reign, at least, probably one of the worst years in Klopp's reign. You've got three big wins there that, everyone will have enjoyed. But Alisson's header, I mean, how anyone could look past that as the moment of 2021 for Liverpool is just, it felt like relief at the end of a long, pretty rubbish season. For a guy who'd been through a lot, deserved it. It was everything that happened afterwards, the teammates' reaction, his emotional interview, which was just one of the best football interviews you'll ever see. And for me personally, Doyle didn't ruin it. It was one game that I haven't had to watch with Twitter open, working with the computer, and see Ian Doyle and Neil Jones ruin the goal. So, for me, I actually watched the goal in real time go in. Which was remarkable, and it was from a goalkeeper. So it was a remarkable moment. I actually remember I was just watching it in my living room with my lad and jumped up and celebrated, because you don't often jump up in your living room, but when Alisson puts one in the top corner in the last minute, you can't really help it. And my 2-year-old lad was running around the room as well, wondering why Daddy was so excited. But it was a hell of a moment, and if anything else, we've got that, haven't we? So 2021. Pretty rubbish, but 2 or 3 really nice memories to go along with it.
There's two things I've forgotten, and I'm sorry to bring these up. The first one is the European Super League in April. What on earth were you thinking about there? I mean, really? I mean, it wasn't just FSG, but it was all of them. And that could only have happened with no fans in the ground, because if there'd been any kind of suggestion, well, I was at Leeds, wasn't I? Was it the following day? I think it was the following day, and they had the kind of the protests outside. Well, there's about 200 people there, but they made the point, and during the game you could hear them outside as well. Some bloke playing a saxophone, a bit weird.
The Manchester United game didn't go
well, this is the thing. The Man United game, that was the other one, where stood outside for 3 hours waiting to get in for a game that didn't happen. It's like, sorry to make that about me there, but the other interesting thing,
and
about
the decoy bus,
the other interesting, the decoy bus. But the other interesting thing about that is where we were stood outside, the fans who'd been on the pitch, some of them they brought through. You know, there's no police. It was just stewards just brought them through. And one of them was like carrying a Tesco carrier bag. It's like he'd gone shopping. I thought, I know what I'll do next. I'll just get on the pitch at Old Trafford, you know, and then I'll go and finish my big shop for this week. It's like, it was like that just summed the first like 7, 8 months of the year up. It's like, what on earth is going on here, basically?
Yeah, no, definitely. Matt, what about yourself? Are you with these guys? It's been a miserable year all round.
Yeah, you can't look past Alisson's goal, can you? For all of the reasons we outlined at the time, and have outlined plenty of time since. I think it's a goal that people are just going to randomly kind of remember for the next 50 or more years, isn't it? It's just going to be, oh, do you remember when Alisson scored that goal? How mad was that? And I think it's fitting, isn't it, that it comes in a year like the guys have said, where there's just been some crazy things that have happened that you wouldn't really believe were possible. And I think that was one of them at the positive end of the spectrum. So yeah, hard to look past Alisson's goal. I think, to be honest, even if, you know, a centre-back or a striker or whoever had headed that ball, it was a brilliant header. The fact that it was Alisson, just, you know, absolutely incredible. So yeah, you can't really look past that, I don't think.
It was also the last goal that was scored behind closed doors by any team in England, certainly in the Premier League. I think it was the last goal scored because they changed the rules, didn't they, the following day, where they were allowed 10,000 in. So yeah, it was almost the last touch of the miserable time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I suppose even one player, I suppose it kind of sums up 2021 was Harvey Elliott, the breakthrough he made, and then the injury he sustains kind of just, it goes with keeping of the year, and what a player he may well have been, and how pivotal he could have perhaps have been for Liverpool in these last recent weeks, and hopefully won't be too long before he's back. Matt, I'm going to come straight back to you for Sunday's game. Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. Is this just a shootout now then, as who can hang on to Man City?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's up to both teams to put the pressure on, isn't it? There's a glimmer of hope, and Liverpool and Chelsea as well have got to kind of cling to that as much as possible. I think Liverpool are better suited to doing that than Chelsea, to be honest. I think we've started to see a couple of maybe little chinks in Chelsea over the last sort of maybe month, maybe just a little bit longer. There's been a couple of results where they haven't maybe looked quite as impressive. I think all season, you know, goal scoring has been a bit of an issue for them. I think that the interview with Romelu Lukaku, I believe, was recorded about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Obviously, the timing of that coming out this week hasn't probably been best for them in terms of preparing for it. I know it's not something that Thomas Tuchel is particularly impressed with. I just think there's maybe 1 or 2 elements of Chelsea now which makes me think that they will be third in the race. And I thought that, to be honest, at the start of the season. I think we thought that City and Liverpool would be the ones most likely to be 1 and 2, and it was a case of which way around that will be. I think for all of these teams, it's just a case of getting as close as you can to Manchester City. If there's any kind of slip up, capitalising upon that, and it'll be interesting, I think, actually in the latter stages of the Champions League, what happens. I think, for me, City, Chelsea, Liverpool, right up there amongst the favourites, probably with, you know, 1 or 2 other teams in there as well from abroad. But I do wonder if there might come a point, maybe sort of March time, if Chelsea are a few points behind, they might start to look more at Europe than at the Premier League, and maybe start to prioritise 1 or 2 of those games. So it'll be interesting. I still think, you know, City, Liverpool, Chelsea is the most likely kind of scenario, but look, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp and his players would say the same thing. There's a long way to go in the title race, and Liverpool just have to put as many wins as possible together as they possibly can.
Yeah, we're going to do our team selector in a bit, Doyle, but I suppose it's nigh on impossible, isn't it, sometimes to try and pick these teams, because Jurgen Klopp starting his press conference today by saying there are yet more kind of cases that they're having to deal with and more players who are unavailable. Yeah,
that's what made me. I was going to say something when Matt said before about how's Klopp going to rotate in between the 2 Arsenal games with Shrewsbury? It's like, rotate what? With who? There's no one left, you know. I'm sure you've spoken about postponements in the past in terms of, you know, because Klopp was asked, he says, look, we've got no plans of trying to ask for the game to be postponed on Sunday. Not sure whether that might change in the next couple of days if they get more positive cases, but I'm of the opinion, just play it. Play all of them. I think most of the clubs that have had them postponed, I think, just doing it for their own best interests. Some of them, like, I'd imagine Leeds, to be fair, had a massive injury list, and I think even without COVID, they possibly might have got 1 of the games called off. But then Man City benefited from it because they absolutely thrashed them. What was it, 7-0 when they had half a team out? And whatever the threshold was, by the time Liverpool went to play them, they had to call the game off. Who knows what condition Leeds and Liverpool will be in when they actually play the game. That's not just them, though. Look at, for example, I think it's on Sunday, Southampton are meant to be playing Newcastle, which is a big game at the bottom of the table. And Southampton have, done the last game they drew with Tottenham, didn't they? So they found, I wouldn't say they found a bit of form, but they certainly got a good result. They got a little bit of momentum. And now Newcastle, just because they've had a few injuries, I think they've opened themselves up to the suggestion that they're just calling it off because they've got players injured and some of them have to be their best players. And that's the lack of transparency is leading to that. So the only way around it is
told riches and the transfer window opens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, by the time they play Southampton, they might have got about £200 million worth of talent. Southampton might be fuming about it. So there is that. I mean, there's what it could go one or two ways. Transparency, don't mention the names of the players, but say how many players have got coronavirus, how many are injured, or just play the games. Why have you spent millions of pounds in your academies? Play the youngsters. Some of these youngsters might be, livid, going, "Great, I've got a great chance to play in here," and it's like, "Oh no, they've called the game off." So I don't know. What was the question?
I was just saying it's going to be difficult to pick a team, isn't it?
Well, I think we could probably have a good guess, but yeah, you're right, because we do know that there's every chance that come Sunday there'll be about another 2 or 3 players. That's just the way things are going at the moment. Whether or not the game should be called off, I just said, completely different matter.
Yeah, it's a game, I suppose, Joe, off the back of Leicester and losing that, albeit saying before the performance actually wasn't all too bad, that it's two sides who don't really find themselves in great form. And Jurgen Klopp did speak about Chelsea's woes as well. They seem to be having a lot of problems, certainly with their wing-backs, both Ben Chilwell and Reece James injured. So normally you'd say there's maybe a chance to get at them, but with Liverpool's own woes, we're not really all too sure.
Well, that's it, isn't it? We don't quite know who's going to be available. Liverpool's midfield looks like it's going to suffer. It's really interesting, isn't it? And it's hard to sort of make a call. You talk about picking teams. I don't know who I can pick. So it's hard to sort of make a call. Liverpool's done all right. Stamford Bridge, haven't they, in recent years? And I actually feel more confident going to Chelsea than I do watching Liverpool play at home, because I think Chelsea can play a slightly different style when they come to Anfield. So, yeah, I mean, I quite fancy Liverpool, in a way to hit back, but it's hard to know who's going to be available, isn't it? And as Tony says, 24 hours can change everything, especially, this variant does seem to be quite aggressive, and, it feels like anyone could test positive in the next 48 hours, couldn't it? And suddenly that game might not go ahead. It'd be interesting to know. I don't know whether the Premier League have put this out. I certainly haven't seen it, if they have. But, what is the threshold? Are they saying, if you've got 7 COVID cases in your first team?
No, you have to have 13 players and a goalkeeper.
13 players and a goalkeeper. But then,
it's 14, yeah.
But academy players, do those players have to be over a certain age?
I think they have to have played one game, don't they?
Yeah, they class it as anyone who's played one game. So is it Harvey Blair who played at Preston in the League Cup? He would count. Yeah, he would count. Yeah, he would have to be considered within that number.
It's just interesting, isn't it? Because I agree with Doyle. It feels like there might be some clubs that are timing it quite well. Some clubs who've got no choice. Other clubs, it seems to be within their gift, doesn't it? To say, we'll try and crack on and play this game. I wonder whether Liverpool will probably try and crack on, because if this got postponed and rearranged, then that could be a rearrange for middle of January, when Liverpool have got players away at the African Cup of Nations. So I'm sure they weren't too pleased about the Leeds game being postponed. So, it's difficult, and it will have an impact on the title race. And City have had a bit of luck so far. They've obviously already got a big squad, so it will have an impact. And Chelsea seem to be of the three, seems to have been hit hardest. It did seem to be. I know they've spent a lot of money and they've got a lot of players, but they seem to be forced to play the other day, didn't they? On Boxing Day, was it? So yeah, it's just a bit chaotic at the moment, isn't it? I was surprised they didn't just try and call it off for 2 weeks, but maybe that wouldn't have made any difference, and they'd still come back, and other teams have been hit by it.
Yeah, I don't think they have the room in the calendar. I'm looking forward to kind of.
Whose fault is that? Though? Whose fault is that they don't have the room in the calendar? That's the thing, isn't it? It's like, we don't have the room, but it's because they're trying to force that many tournaments in, and we've got a World Cup at the end of next year that we're throwing in the middle of the season. So, I love all these old school pundits who go, "Oh, why is Klopp complaining?" It's like, there isn't a minute. There isn't a minute to stop, is there, at the moment? It seems to be football, and
The football never stops.
Yeah, the football never stops. That's it, isn't it? And then in doing so, it means that when things like this happen, they have absolutely no wiggle room. Because it's like, well, where do you play the games? We can't have a 2-week break because there really isn't a 2-week break from now until the end of 2029. So, it's they've only got themselves to blame.
Yeah, no. Look forward to March, April, May being Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday games for every team in the Premier League, and there'll be no stop whatsoever.
Burnley can go top 4 if they win the games in hand.
Right, anyway, let's get into our team selector, then head off the trip to Stamford Bridge. Doyle, you can start us off, goalkeeper and back four.
Right, well, okay, right. There's 3 players who are new players who've got COVID. We don't know the names of them officially. However, we do know that Alisson and Firmino weren't training on Thursday. So using my A-level maths of taking 2 and putting 2 together and coming up with 4, that kind of basis.
Is that A-level?
I thought you said there was 3 players.
No, I'm just saying 2 plus 2 equals 4. Showing I can actually count. Yeah, using that kind of logic. I got an A-level maths, yeah.
No, I said, did you do that at A-level?
What?
I didn't think they were about.
Yeah. That was how you started. Yeah. Right. So I'm going to put Kelleher in goal, right. And then it's going to be Tsimikas at left back, Trent right back. I'm going to go with Van Dijk, and I'm going to go with Konate because I do believe that a little bit of strength and speed up against Lukaku, and that because I'm telling you now, Lukaku will be absolutely massively up for it on Sunday. Totally, no chance. They'll build an entire team around him just in one day, right? So that's what'll happen. So yeah, that's the back four and the keeper.
Okay, Joe, do you agree with that, or are you going to change it?
Broadly, yeah. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Doyley's logic for Konate is absolutely spot on, but Matip was one of the players I think that emerged from Leicester with a fair bit of credit. So it feels harsh. But then when you take into account he doesn't have the best fitness record, albeit this season he's done well. 2 games in that amount of days. He probably will put Konate in, yeah. And I agree, yeah, I think Lukaku would be up for it. But by the way, he's a bloody disgrace, isn't he? I hate him if he played for Liverpool. I just think, why do you need to always do interviews about how you feel? And he leaves into it and then bangs on about how much he loves the fans. If you love them that much, why was he banging on about going back to Chelsea when he was at Inter? Why does he bang? Just what
about when he was on Merseyside and every
international break? And then it's like he still says things like, "Oh, I love the Everton fans. I'd love to go. Maybe I can see myself." How many clubs can he see himself going back to between now and the end of his career? By the way,
how long was he at Everton? Was it 3 years or 4? 3 or 4.
On loan for a year, wasn't he? And then I think 2
and
after that.
The thing is, he was quite clearly the best player at the time. By the way,
yeah.
Because I was covering Everton, and it was just funny that I was like, he's quite clearly the best player for Everton, and the 1 or 2. That my colleagues were like, no, he's lazy, he's rubbish, he's this, that, and the other. Well, he's gone on to play for Man United, Inter Milan, and Chelsea, and he's won loads of trophies. So I think he's won that particular argument.
He's a super player. Don't get me wrong, I like him, but he's a pain. I just wouldn't be able to stomach the constant interviews and.
No, I would love the constant interviews as long as they were with me. That would involve actually speaking to a footballer. Imagine that, eh?
They wouldn't be because it's always back to the foreign media when he's on international duty, isn't he? So.
We're not right, so anyway. Moving on.
Yeah, Matt, what about you, mate? What do you see for the Liverpool defence?
Yeah, I agree with the guys. I think there's a good sort of argument really for Konate, but I'd probably just edge towards Joel Matip. I think for obviously the reasons of him being just so experienced. I know there's obviously the edge in physicality for Konate, but I don't think it would be a real worry at all to put Matip in. So yeah, Tsimikas, Van Dijk, Matip and Trent, and obviously Alisson, if he is there, will play. If not, he'll be Kelleher.
Stick with you, Matt, then. What about the midfield?
So midfield, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Without Thiago, I think is a big miss. Obviously, Fabinho, Henderson, and then one more, isn't it? So, I mean, Naby Keita didn't particularly do brilliantly midweek. Possibly would go with him. Oxlade-Chamberlain's an option. James Milner, but would you fancy him from the start? Probably not. I think I'd probably edge towards Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain on the basis of the last couple of weeks, but yeah, it's not a particularly easy decision, I don't think.
Yeah, what about yourself, Joe? You going with Ox and then Henderson and Fabinho? Or?
I'm tempted to go with Keita because I think he could use the ball quite well in their final third to try and open Chelsea up. But, Oxlade-Chamberlain I thought played quite well in the first half at Leicester, has played well in recent weeks. I'm gonna edge towards Keita. I've just got a funny feeling that I think he could be quite good there. I'll go with Keita, but harsh on Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think was playing quite well.
What about yourself, Doyle?
I thought Fabinho was really poor against Leicester.
Because he often is when he comes back in, though, isn't he?
I think it was more to do with the fact that he didn't want to get booked to miss this game. And now, of course, it wasn't his fault, but this game isn't quite as important as it could have been had Liverpool actually beaten Leicester. So that didn't exactly, it didn't exactly work. But I think he's got to play. I think Henderson's got to play as well. And I go with Keita purely on the basis that he's not going to be there for a couple of weeks. So if he's fit, play him.
Right, okay. Joe, what about the front three then?
Well, as we were talking about before, Firmino wasn't in the training pictures, so he could be one of the three with COVID. So just got to be Jota, Mane, and Salah. And Salah and Mane are off, aren't they, soon anyway? So I don't think Liverpool have much choice either. Minamino's still injured, Origi's injured. Jota, Mane, Salah, and Harvey Blair coming off the bench.
What about yourself, Matt? Are you in agreement it has to be those three?
Yeah, I mean, if Firmino is fit, I'd be very tempted to take Sadio Mane out. I think he's had a difficult couple of weeks. I'd be tempted to play Jota left, Firmino central, and Salah off the right. But look, if Jurgen Klopp's hands are forced, as we think he might obviously be missing for Firmino for this one, I think it's going to be a case of Mane having to go again. But I know there's obviously the case for him going off to AFCON and you just play him anyway. But I think for this one, I'd have been tempted to take him out, but probably there won't be any choice.
Okay, then. What about then into the score predictions? And I'll go with you first, Joe. You can tell us what the score is going to be at Stamford Bridge, 4:30 kickoff.
Am I playing with no forwards then?
Oh, sorry,
no forwards then, yeah.
Sorry, Joe. I thought I'd actually already asked you. What about your team then? Go on then.
Well, Kate Gordon, Harvey Blair. No, not really. No, I think, again, unlike Matt, I think Mane has got to play because he's not going to be there for the best part of a month. Salah's got to play. If Firmino is available, I will play him instead of Jota, but as we don't think that he will be, I think it's going to have to be Diogo.
Right, okay then. Joe, I'll ask you now then, what's the score going to be?
Well, I'm going to say that I think Liverpool will win. I think they'll win 2-1. And Mane's a funny one because I fancy him to score on Sunday only because people always talk about how poor Mane is, but you think about it, he's still a constant menace to any team that he plays against. He never hides. He always makes runs. He always, whether he makes the wrong decisions at the end of it, he always seems to be the player who's causing teams problems. So for me, I just think he's still a big part of what Liverpool do, even when he's poor. I still think he's better than the alternative, which is to put Firmino in. I still prefer Mane in the team, so I think Liverpool will win. I think Mane will score.
Okay. What about yourself then, Matt? Scoreline?
I'm going to be quite pessimistic about this weekend. I think Man City will batter Arsenal, and I think Liverpool-Chelsea will be 1 each.
Brilliant stuff. Looking forward to that then. Doyle, score?
I'm not surprised, but forget their injuries and the COVID situation at Chelsea. Even before then, they were getting some iffy results. Look, they drew 1-1 with Everton's Z team by almost, didn't they, the other week? That was at home. I think they drew Burnley as well, drew United and jammed it against Leeds. And I think they've been jamming it for most of the season. I mean, there's nothing wrong with scoring goals through defenders or set pieces or from penalties, but it's Jorginho, their top scorer again. He can't be far off. He can't be
him
far
or Reece
off.
James, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think Liverpool, if they get their game plan right, irrelevant to whoever they have playing out there, unless they get loads of cases between now and Sunday, I think Liverpool should win. And they might even win pretty, not comfortably, but I think it may be a game where it underlines the class, or exposes, I should say, the class between what I think is the class between the two teams. It's just a shame that both teams can't be at full strength, because I think that game would have been more indicative, even more so. So I think Liverpool will win 2-0.
Right. Okay, then. That sums us up for 2021 then here on the Blood Red podcast. Hopefully it's a more prosperous 2022 and plenty more to look forward to. Enjoy to be had in the next calendar year for the Reds. But for myself, Guy Clarke, Matt Addison, Joe Rimmer, and the joyful Ian Doyle, thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.